first panel today will be discussing architecture discipline in an Agile environment. We'll kick it off by each exploring a few points, which we'll then go over in more detail through questions and answers, and then you'll have some time to formulate questions yourselves, and we'll take those from the audience. I'm Matt Westerman. I'm from USAA. We're a financial services company. We do several hundred IT projects each year, and we're in year 3, really, of an Agile journey that right now has us doing about 40% of our portfolio using Agile development. There's also widespread use of Agile practices across the rest of the portfolio as well. I work in CTO, and I focus on our development processes and tools, and also our application architecture, standards, and governance. My slide says focus on being Agile, not just doing Agile. And that's been sort of my mantra as we've taken on this Agile journey, because we have Agile coaches come in, we have people reading books on Agile, studying the manifesto, and they want to have religious arguments about should we have stickies on the wall or should we have work in a tool, and how long should our iterations be. And it tends to go on, and it really does turn into religious debate. And the way I heard it phrased the best was earlier this summer. A gentleman said, you want to be in the business of making candles. You want to be in the business of selling candles, not religion. And that's really the way I feel about software development. The engineering practices we're talking about here, continuous integration, automated testing, those are the candles. They give you strength in any development environment. And particularly in Agile, they give the architects something tangible and objective that they can use to measure quality. And so, also with the architecture in an Agile environment, we still have, in our case, a very large enterprise. We have infrastructure, we have frameworks, we have reuse and consistency that the architects are worried about. And so when we're doing Agile, it's very important for the architects to set the boundaries and establish what we will not compromise in the name of going faster, while still providing flexibility and engagement with the teams. And I look at the architects as the protectors of the other stakeholders in the Agile environment. They worry about the ilities, they worry about ops, they worry about the maintenance team, they worry about how to architect a solution that will work for distributed teams. We need an architecture that allows us to do distributed Agile development and go fast and maintain discipline. And then lastly, we'll talk about a little bit about some of the new technologies on the horizon, new ways of doing development, new platforms, maybe non-traditional developers that when you combine with Agile will affect the architecture in ways that we haven't experienced in the past. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Chris.
Hi, everyone. I'm Chris McDaniel. I'm formerly with Visa. I have had an amazing experience actually managing a lot of the architecture strategic efforts at Visa and other places. My advice actually is kind of in 3 different places. What I would actually offer is that first thing you want to do is that architecture can be Agile, right? Architecture, what I helped introduce was this kind of Kanban process where we would actually go out and actively work with these different Scrum and development organizations, and then go into this kind of iteration process of actually deciding and on the right solution, and then figuring out and publishing different decisions. Actually, what we found actually was that architecture wasn't really this kind of upfront kind of design document only. It was actually this iterative process. It became a living document of different decisions, because things evolved so quickly. So what I would offer actually is the first thing is, kind of adopt like this Kanban kind of approach, very similar to what the development teams are doing, and then the second thing actually I would offer up is, you really have to kind of be involved in these actual architecture decisions and these architecture groups. The situation actually is in Agile, with these 2-week scrums and sprints and things like this, things actually are going to go. They're going to happen. They're going to continue to go on. What you have to do is be involved in it, right? And kind of be, on one end, be the adult in the room, but on the other side, actually learn and understand what these people are trying to do. They're really just trying to be, they're tasked with massive, fast delivery. And so what you have to do is understand that, and go into the third piece is what I actually offer up is, define different solutions, be the champion of reusable solutions, common platforms, things like that that actually would enable these development organizations to be successful.
Thank you.
Hey, Raji, Arasu. I'm sorry, I have usually a problem bouncing on the stage, so let me know when I start bouncing. I lead the product and technology organization at StubHub. What you see up here is a stack that most of you are probably either working on, either you have tackled it or you're in the process of tackling. So it's no different than all of us struggling with SOA-based tier approach. But having gone through SOA transformation and Agile transformation in a couple of companies, couple of big organizations, I think there are some really key lessons for me, and I want to share those with you. One for me is the fact that the rate of change actually starts to really increase as you go up the stack. So one of the biggest problems we have had is things tend to actually change more when you're working in a business application versus down in the tier. And one of the key things that I have actually done at StubHub and other areas is we have invested heavily in our UI framework. So thinking about how you can actually abstract more and push things downward in the stack is a very important consideration. So a big bulk of our teams are actually Agile teams working on the top layer, which is a business application. And I think Jeremy said some of that. It's primarily, at the end of the day, the business cares about the application, and they want to see change there. And it's not a matter of seeing change in months, but it's in weeks. So how fast can you move? When you think about these teams, what's not top of their mind is scalability, standardization, or reuse. Those are not top of these folks that they're thinking through this. Mostly what they're thinking about is speed. So it's really essential in this particular sort of environment for technology leadership and architectures to play a role of creating boundaries and guidelines upfront in the process. And I think a lot of that is, you will use the error handling and the modules from the UI framework, and it's okay for you to make some later investments in internationalization, site performance. These kind of specificity is something that you want to lay up front, because there's a lot of question as the organization is big and there are many Agile teams. You do run into those issues of what can I do and what can I do outside the system. Because it's okay to have lab teams going off and running off on Ruby on Rails, but when you're going through a core platform and innovation on the core, it's important to set those guidelines. And I think that's really, really key. Another key observation, which might not be so popular with some of you who are very religious about Agile, is my observation is as you go down the stack, I needed to actually spend more time with upfront design and really defining what those interfaces are. And it's not about, hey, we can all move in Agile teams and we can just do what we want, because as you go down the stack, a lot of these teams are producing stuff that's really going to get in the way of the speed for the top teams. So it's really important for us to actually give these teams the time for discovery and upfront design. That is one of the things that I've observed is it's okay to have those teams actually move in a Scrum fashion, but having them take the time to actually define their interface is absolutely important. So these are some learnings, and I think architecture tends to spend more time as you go down the stack. They do dedicate more because of the fact that the teams have to do the upfront design. There is another key learning specifically around Agile teams and distributed teams. I think it's, most of you probably sitting in the room are dealing with either distributed teams within United States or even outside in a big way. And it's sort of like it doesn't necessarily work with the same Agile concepts. It's hard. And in general, the tendency for a business when you kick off a critical initiative is, wow, let's think about the thought leaders in the local site, and let's actually create burst capacity for ourselves in engineering and quality maybe in these other areas. It's okay in the beginning, it works great, and soon it actually gets to a downward spiral. So one of the things that I think over time and time again is proven really well and sort of works well is the fact that you really create self-contained teams in these distributed sites, and really give them separate functionality and separate domains that they can actually take ownership of and can run on their own. Now, why isn't this happening everywhere? And why is it not in place? I think there's several cons to this approach. I think one of the key things I have realized is most product business leaders don't want to take their top initiatives and actually send it out of sight. It's hard. It's hard to do that when that's key to you and key to everything you do. And I also think that sometimes when you are sending these functionalities down to the distributed centers, you often don't want to give them areas that have a ton of cross dependencies. So what that usually lends to is less enticing areas that go off to the distributed centers. So there's definitely a feeling of, wow, we're getting domains that are probably not as key to what we should be working on, and we struggle with that as well. But I think there's half an answer here and probably the other that we need to figure out. So, thank you.
Hi, I'm Shabbir Singleton. I'm with, excuse me, in technology. But prior to that, I spent a couple of years at Visa, where I was chief systems architect. So as that title implies, I was on the system side. So how do you do kind of agile architecture in a systems team, right? Typically, we're the guys that provide the hardware for the development teams. You know, compute, storage, you know, do we have enough IOPS, do we have enough capacity, that kind of thing. So how do we do that? And especially at Visa, where everything is very heavily standardized, lots of security. Security is mandated into everything. You don't have a lot of, you know, choices and flexibility. So how do you do this? And so we got a couple of projects where it turned out that these were systems-only projects where there's no development involved, mostly. One of them was a startup that Visa had bought, and we were moving it's a payment site out of their hosting site into a different hosting site. And we took the opportunity to bring it up to kind of Visa standards, where you have, you know, 3 tiers architecture, you have firewalls everywhere, that kind of thing, right? And so it wasn't really a development project. It was more of a systems project, and getting the old architecture or system to work in this new architecture. And so we did, you know, sprints, and it's basically getting it to work, you know, splitting out their application, getting it to work in a 3-tier architecture. The other project was we were actually moving stuff out to the Amazon cloud. And we started off with some marketing sites because those are, you know, low risk. And we had no standards around the cloud. This is all new for us. And so it is really greenfield. And these were marketing sites that already existed, hosted either internally or outside, and we were moving them to the cloud. So again, we were able to, I was able to create an architecture within the Amazon ecosystem, and then, you know, since we were learning, we had different options. If you do, if they use RDS, you have either you can use Oracle or MySQL, and so we had these options. We tried them both to see which one worked better, you know, and we got the sites up and running. So yes, you can do agile architecture within a systems group, and not just development, as Chris was just talking about at Visa as well.
Hello, I'm Nico Van Summer, and I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Good Technology. I've been in the security industry for most of the last 20 years, but I've been with Good for 3, and Good was my first company where I was actively involved in developing in an agile methodology. Good has many moving parts. Many of you I know are actually users of our product, but many of you probably don't know how complex what we produce is. We have mobile applications. We have consoles which have web interfaces. We have servers that we deploy on site. We have servers that we run in our own data centers with 5 nines SLAs on them. So there's a lot of different types of product in our organization. Some are very, very dynamic products where we're constantly churning out features that are specific to requests coming in from users and very outward-facing. Some of it is relatively static in comparison. It's not actually static, but it looks like it in comparison. When you're running a network operations center that has to have the sort of uptime that you expect when 8 out of the top 10 CEOs of banks in the world get up in the morning and they click on your logo and they expect to get their email immediately, I have to make sure that that service is running. So messing with the code in the data center does not engender me to my operations team. When I started socializing Agile out to our customer base, I got a lot of pushback because there is considered generally to be a fundamental tension between Agile and security. And particularly that comes down to a perception of a tension between Agile and a good secure development lifecycle program. I have to get my products through common criteria EAL4 certification for some of my government customers. And that requires me to demonstrate a methodical design, validation, and testing architecture. I have to put my services through audit by PwC every year for SSAE 16, and I have to be able to show them the documentation for my development processes, and I have to be able to point to an awful lot of documentation. So there's often considered to be a tension between the Agile Manifesto and the desire to infuse security, not just security as a feature, but security as a fundamental philosophy in the way that you design your products. On the left-hand side of my slide, I put a bunch of things which are the sorts of things I was told by many of my customers and some of my regulators about how they felt that Agile doesn't fit with security. These are not necessarily things that I subscribe to, because I think the key here is that Agile is itself agile. You know, we must not be dogmatic. Religious was a word I heard from almost everybody on this panel. Agile should be agile. We should adjust our agile process to fit the needs of our organization. Because if we don't, we're never going to make a success. If we are dogmatic, here are the 4 points of my manifesto, and we will follow them religiously. We're not going to document anything until after we've built it. You know, I have to be able to tell people how we want to deliver security in order for me to ensure that every single one of my scrums is going to think about that before they write the code. I have to deliver a security architecture document to my testing house for my common criteria evaluation. It took them a little convincing, but we deliver them a living document. We don't deliver them something that was cast in stone at the beginning of the project, because we know that things evolve. And in the security space, things evolve very rapidly. New threats come along, and we have to be able to adjust our threat model, we have to be able to adjust our trust model, and we have to be able to adjust our security architecture. But on the other hand, we do have to be able to document it and show that we've rigorously followed the process. We've also introduced things like introducing security assessments and validation into the definition of done, so that when we roll out a piece, when we have a sprint, how do we know when the sprint is done? Well, the sprint is done when, amongst other things, the security team has signed off that the appropriate bits were defined as either being security sensitive or not, and if they were, then an appropriate security review has been performed on them. So we can use the Agile process to drive the security architecture. And so if you want to achieve this, you just have to be willing to tweak Agile in order to reach those goals.